Hey, everybody, and welcome back to My Thoughts from Tumor Town. Now, I want to do this as kind of an intro to when I discuss things about my life, my own personal life. But I want to make it clear that I understand entirely how lucky I am to have been born into the family that I was. And I don't mean to say this in a way that's going to offend or upset anybody, but we all know that there's an extreme randomness as to how your consciousness ends up in the body of the baby that it does. No one knows how this happens or why it happens, it just does. And I was extremely fortunate in the sense that my consciousness ended up in the child of a white, upwardly mobile couple in the United States in the 1950s. And you can't ask really for a much better deal than that. I mean, we all know that your life can be largely impacted by the fact of the family that you're born into, where they are, and what their history is. We know this. We know that the world has been built for centuries and thousands of years on systemic racism, classism, and so forth. So I've known this and understood this for decades. And I just, want to make it clear that I understand just how lucky I am to have been born to the parents I was born to at the time I was born and in the place I was born. It gave me advantages and opportunities in my life that I may have never had if I had been born to someone else in some other place of the world. And I understand that, and I am so, so grateful for that. I also want people to understand that I was born in a time that is almost unbelievable by today's standards. Back then in the 50s, coming out of World War II, America ruled the world. I mean, we were rebuilding the world that had been destroyed in World War II. We were just going through this massive infrastructure spending and construction program in the United States. We had the GI Bill that was giving all sorts of ex-servicemen opportunities they never would have had for education and opportunity for financial growth. The world was just burgeoning under the dominance of the United States. I mean, we were the kings of the world at that moment, and we were experiencing the single greatest time of social democracy in America's history. And everyone benefited. When you hear that thing, it raises everyone's boats. Well, it did, without question. I can say without fear of contradiction that my father would have never been the man he turned out to be had it not been for the GI Bill. He never would have gone to college, ever, had it not been for that. And college is what changed the path of his life. So it was just a period that was an entirely different time. And in my family, my parents were non-religious and non-political. I say that in the sense that as we grew up, myself and my older brother, we never discussed in our family religion or politics. It just never came up. We didn't go to church on Sundays. We didn't, do prayers at meals. We just weren't religious. And my parents never spoke about politics at all. Issues of the day, that sort of thing. No. If you heard about it, you heard about it because you were watching the evening news with Walter Cronkite that they were watching. That was about it. So I had a very innocent childhood in that respect because, I was unaware of so many of the things that were going on around the world because I was so young. They just didn't touch me, didn't affect me. The Korean War, Vietnam War, Civil Rights Movement, all of the Vietnam movements, all of those things, the Jim Crow reigning in the South, all of the poverty, and everything else that was going bad and wrong in the world back then. I just didn't know about it. If I did, it was just on the fringes of the outside. Didn't really affect me. So I went through my early years and, my elementary school years and stuff pretty much just like, hey, this is a great and wonderful world. I live in a wonderful little neighborhood. There's tons of kids here of all ages, families from all over. This is great. This is wonderful. I'm 4 blocks basically from my elementary school. I'm 8 blocks from my junior high school, and I'm 12 blocks from my high school. How much better can you get? I mean, and this was a time when, like, starting in the 3rd grade, I walked to school. We all did. Can you imagine people letting their kids do that today? And I don't recall ever really hearing about, a mass shooting, someone being shot because they went into the wrong driveway, any of that kind of stuff. When I was a kid, it was almost as if, that was that period you hear, tell about at times where you didn't have to lock your doors, And because it was a smaller town and a smaller community at that time, and this is in Central Florida, everybody kind of knew everybody. I mean, all the kids went to school together and all the time, right? We all spent our youth through that whole period, elementary through high schools together, because we all went to the same schools. We all went through that together. Our families knew each other. They socialized together. Businesses, you did business with so forth and so on. So it was a much tighter sense of community, right? And the parents were involved in little civic groups, the JCs, this and that and the other thing. So there was a much greater sense of community that existed back then that I don't know you find that much today. And I just want to say that I appreciate all of that. And I understand how much all of that played into how my life played out and how it turned out to be the great life that I believe I had. Because I can't look at my life and say, wow, it's been a really hard, terrible, crushing thing. It's a terrible, terrible thing. No, I've had a really good life. I have done and seen a lot of things that a lot of people will never see. And then, there's people that have the same thing, but, my uniqueness of my life is mine, and I wouldn't give it up for anything. It's been wonderful. I have very few regrets, but, we all have some. So I just want to make sure that everyone understands that in that sense, and that I say this knowing the challenges that many individuals and social groups face in this world, who are simply put at disadvantages because of something about them, about who they are, where they were born, the color of their skin, that really, in a true sense, shouldn't be there, but is. And I often think back in my mind and think, had I been born a little earlier, would I have been willing to put myself on the line, as others did in the civil rights movement? I'd like to think that I would. I don't know that, but I'd like to think that I would, because I think it's important. And I just seem to have been born at a time where I tend to be right on the outside of those kinds of things. I'm too young, or I'm just a little bit behind the curve to really get involved in those kinds of movements and try to make a difference. I wish I could have made bigger differences in those respects than I did, perhaps. But that's the way it goes. Life is the way it is. So I'll get on with it and try to do some videos about the times in my life so people get a feel for the kind of life I led, and we'll go from there. But we've at least established that. And again, I hope that doesn't offend anybody or upset anybody. That's simply the way I see it and the way I feel. So thanks, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace. Hang 10.